Yeah, and we're going to talk about another piece of his work here where he talks about could the SEC start playing 9 conference games? Andy Staples put out a piece about the SEC and the possibility of them going to 9 conference games. Well, Zach, I think they're kind of like holding college football hostage here because the way Andy Staples puts it, it's like, if you give us automatic bids, we will go to 9. We will give you what you've been dreaming of, what you've been wanting all this time. We will give you 9 conference games for the SEC. It's just such a smug way. And to me, it validates the thought that I had that like all of this auto bid stuff, it's not really the Big Ten all that much. Like, yes, the Big Ten wants it, but the Big Ten is not vying for this stuff as much
Yeah.
as the SEC is. Because at the end of the day, the Big Ten got 4 teams in last year completely out of merit and what the teams did that season. And even if you want to say Indiana didn't deserve to be in there, they weren't the last team in. SMU was the last team in. So if you were going to put Alabama or Ole Miss or South Carolina in over them, you had um you had SMU getting knocked out before one of them. So, but it's just such a smug way of looking at it. It's typical SEC. Give us what we want, and we'll go to 9 games and all this stuff and everything. If I'm the Big 12 and the ACC, I'm not budging. I don't think 9 games really means that much to me, but apparently the end of next month is when the SEC meets and decides if they're going to go to 8 or 9 games for the conference in 2026. And a lot of that will depend on if they get automatic bids in 2026 or not. Zach, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean the SEC for the first time realizes they're playing a little bit from behind. And so they're trying to protect themselves. And on one hand, I don't think it's a bad thing to say, hey, we need to protect our interests. But I think it's so obvious to, I think, the watching world that they are nervous about their standing in college football for the first time. And they're losing influence where they had it in spades for 20 to 25 years, right? It was just assumed that one of the two best teams or both of the best teams in college football was down in the Southeastern Conference. And I think even your most ardent Big Ten fans understood that, right? You go back to, early 2010s, late 2000, the aughts, those were dominant. It was a dominant SEC run, and you can't ignore that. And now you're without Nick Saban. Again, a coaching dearth. And yes, they still have probably more of the talent, but they are not who they used to be. And now
Not
they
by or go
sorry, go
ahead.
ahead.
I was gonna say not by any means. I mean, I was just listening to a show. I think it was Minister Sports. I have to give proper credit. I'm almost positive it was them. They were going through and looking at the SEC and their dominant run and just how many like draft picks and stuff like that they had because they were marveling a little bit at Ohio State getting 4 first round draft picks. I forget what year they said it was. I think it was 2017. Alabama one year on their national championship team had 27 first round draft picks on their team. When you look at the future drafts, obviously they were not playing that year, but like freshmen to seniors, there were 27
That's
first round
insane.
picks. It absolutely insane. That's why the SEC was so dominant because you had teams like Alabama, Georgia was starting to get to that place. LSU was in that place in
Yeah.
2019 where it didn't matter who the coach was. You could have had a snail as the coach and they would have won the national championship in 2018 with how much talent LSU had. Like you just look at all this talent they had. It is exactly right that NIL and the transfer portal have completely gotten rid of the SEC's dominance when it comes to that stuff. And that's why I made the point earlier about Auburn, Zach, is that yes, they've recruited really well, but they're losing a ton of players. And so
Yeah.
even if they have really good players starting, they don't have the depth. And that's what Big Ten teams do have, because you see coaches like Kirk Cinetti and Brett Bielema, and even USC right now and UCLA in some ways too, like going out and getting like solid depth behind their starters, guys who would be starting at Group of Five schools or possibly even Big Ten schools. Like Kellen Wyatt was probably going to start at Maryland this year.
Hmm.
They brought him over. He's going to start. He's not a depth piece for Indiana, but still, like that turns what you were going to have as your starter into a depth piece now, and they didn't lose that guy. So, like, as far as I'm concerned, it continues to show how much the SEC does not have a monopoly on this talent
Yeah.
anymore. They realize it, they know it, and guys like Kirby Smart and Shane Beamer, who were touting draft picks for all these years, are starting to look at it now and say, we're still getting draft picks, but holy crap, we don't have nearly as many draft picks on our two deep as we once did.
Yeah.
And so they're feeling the pressure because they got to go out and recruit, start freshmen, and and try to get guys to come up from the lower ranks. I mean, there's a reason why Ohio State and Georgia is like fighting over like a Georgia Southern defensive tackle right now,
Hmm.
because that's where you have to go for some of this talent.
Yeah. And I think I saw that South Carolina got that Georgia Southern defensive
Oh, that
tackle.
Troy Pikes guy.
Yeah, Troy Pikes. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, they were going after him too. Yeah,
Um, but yeah, well, and to that point, to add a ninth conference game, it and we've seen it in the Big Ten, it opens you up to risk. However, there's a counterpoint here. You could make the argument that if they schedule a ninth conference game, it actually might protect them. Because one of the trends, right, if you look at the three teams that were 9-3, one of the things that you noticed is that their out of conference games sucked. And like the only marquee Power Five game that was scheduled, I think, out of all those schools, South Carolina. Well, South Carolina had Clemson, right? So that was a win. Um, Alabama had Wisconsin. Ultimately, didn't matter. No offense to Wisconsin fans. And then Ole Miss, they had Wake Forest, I think. Not a threat. So you could make an argument that South Carolina had a big time team. But like imagine if they replaced another, their FCS team with another good, like a good SEC team. You're probably talking about them a little differently at 9-3 rather than 10 and rather than how we did this past year. Because even Clemson was decent. They weren't great.
right.
So
Well,
like,
and
yeah,
correct me if I'm wrong, but after Alabama lost to Oklahoma, didn't they play an FCS team like right after that?
yeah, yeah,
Imagine if Alabama played, I don't know, who didn't they play last year? Imagine if they played Missouri. No, they did play Missouri. They played Missouri. They played Georgia. They played
yeah.
Tennessee, LSU.
What if Alabama
Imagine if they
played
played
Texas?
Texas. Yeah,
Yeah,
imagine if they played Texas and they won after that. They would have been in the playoffs.
yeah,
They would have certainly made it in at 9-3 if they
yeah,
would have won that game coming off a loss to Oklahoma.
yeah. The problem, and this is part of what we were, I think, railing against those SEC teams, is it wasn't. Everybody kept saying, "Well, you're more than your record," and I'm like, I agree. The problem is if you look at who those teams lost to and who they beat, it didn't make sense.
Yeah.
Like, and that's this whole 9-game argument. Everybody thinks that it was just because of record. And you say, well, just play easier games. It's like, no, that's gonna make it worse for you when you do lose your games. And then you're gonna cry about it again. When instead you should have just beat like Ole Miss, you should have beat Kentucky.
Right. And like this is the issue with Alabama fans screaming, "Oh, well, we're just not going to schedule anybody hard in the out of conference anymore." And it's like that's going to be worse for you because the
Yep.
games you were losing were in your conference. You need to show that you can't just beat SEC teams, but you can go out of your conference. Now, unfortunately for
Right.
Alabama, which I'm not crying foul for them at all. I do not care. Good for them. For this to be against them, but Wisconsin was no good last year. They went 5-7, so their win against Wisconsin at Wisconsin really kind of nullified things for them. But imagine if they had done what Texas did and beaten Michigan early in the year, who was considered a top 10 team. They'd have been vaulted up, and that would have helped them even more. But
Yep.
unfortunately for them, that didn't that didn't happen because Wisconsin wasn't as good of a team. They were talking about like, oh, we just need to schedule better or worse non-conference teams. And it's like, no, that actually won't help you when you lose 24-3 to Oklahoma, who's 6-6 and loses to Navy in their bowl game or Army.
Yep.
Was it Navy or Army? One of the two.
Yeah.
But yeah, so um, good comment here by AJ. Says it's the new world. The SEC is weeping because the playing field is even. Some of it's not even just even. It's just the Big Ten is better. I agree with you, AJ. It's a good comment. I'm just saying, like, yes, things are even, but also the Big Ten has better coaches and is better
Yep.
at developing their players. And so now you are giving a more even playing field for not necessarily getting talent, but not letting the SEC stockpile that talent. Alabama doesn't have 27 first rounders on a team anymore. It just doesn't
Yeah.
happen because
Yeah.
these guys go to schools and expect to want to play right away. And with how much you have to pay a freshman, you expect that freshman to contribute right away. There's a reason why um, Jeremiah Smith started playing at Ohio State right away. Yes, he was good enough, but also he's making like $4 million. You don't let that sit
Hmm.
on the bench. There's a reason
Right.
why DeCorian Moore is going to play this season. You don't let $2 million, $3 million private jet rides sit on the bench. Bryce Underwood. There's a reason why he's going to play. I keep hearing people say, "Oh, maybe Mikey Keene will start the season." Mikey Keene's not making $4 million this year. You don't pay a dude $4 million and put him on your bench. Maybe at the start of the season, but not for the entire season. Just doesn't happen. Like it. So
I feel like I just got called out for that because I was that
no, no,
guy
no, no,
saying Mikey Keene. No, okay.
no, no,
I
no,
know.
no, no.
I've changed my tune on that.
You said it. You said you thought Mikey Keene was going to be the guy, and Bryce Underwood would eventually take over, or it would be a two QB system with Bryce Underwood once things started picking up. And that was more my point than anything. Is like Bryce Underwood's going to get in the game. They're not just going to let him sit
Yeah.
on the bench the
Yeah.
entire
Yeah. Yeah.
season. I held true to like I think he's going to start, but even if he doesn't start, he's still going to get in the game, and they're still going to utilize him. Trick plays, whatever else, like they're going to utilize him somehow.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. You got to.